Hey everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Dustin Albertson. I'm the Senior Cloud SA with Veeam for Global Alliances. And I have Brent Bain with me, who is with Best Friends Animal Society. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over Veeam, who Veeam is. Probably most of you know who Veeam is. If not, we'll just kind of do a brief highlight of that. And then we'll go into a customer use case about how Best Friends Animal Society leveraged Veeam and AWS to protect their data and DR as well. So, and why it's important. And then we'll follow up with, go into a little bit of a deep dive on the feature that they leveraged. And then I'll make a brief announcement about a product that we just announced today and a feature session for tomorrow for more of a deep dive on that. So who is Veeam? Are most of you, just to raise a hands real quick, who's heard of Veeam? Oh, great. Well, this is easy. I can just breeze through these slides then. So Veeam's constantly getting awards. We're constantly iterating and adding new features to our product. So we are moving up in the Gartner Magic Quadrant year after year. We are constantly getting a NPS score that is very high in relation to the rest of the market. NPS score, for those of you who don't know what it is a net promoter score, and it's just a way to measure customer satisfaction with your product. And would customers recommend your product to somebody that they know or something like that. So some of these are you can see some highlights here. We have over 355,000 customers worldwide. We are constantly hiring. We're at over 4,000 now. I think we got our latest hire in the bag. But yeah, we are growing. We had $1 billion in bookings, which is very big for us as a privately held company. So we don't have shareholders or things like that that we answer to. And if we want to make a change in our product, we just make that change. We don't have to, adhere to like a typical plan that someone that's publicly traded would have to. So let's just dig right into it because that's why you're here. So I'll hand it over to Brent and we'll go through the Best Friends use case.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Brent Bain, Senior Cloud Engineer with Best Friends Animal Society. I'm going to go over a little bit about what Best Friends is, what our mission is, our current goals, and then we'll get into how we're using Veeam, and then I'm also going to go over a little bit about how Best Friends actually responds to natural disasters as well. So Best Friends was founded by a group of founders in 1984 as a single sanctuary on about 4,000 acres in southern Utah. The sanctuary is also our headquarters, and it's located in a beautiful Red Rock Canyon in southern Utah. It's right near several national parks, including Grand Canyon, Zion, and Bryce National Park. The sanctuary has about 30,000 people visit each year, and is currently the nation's largest no-kill animal sanctuary for companion animals. Best Friends has also expanded nationally. We've opened locations in Salt Lake City, 2 in Los Angeles, 1 in Mission Hills, and 1 in Santa Monica, just off the 405, 1 in Atlanta, and 1 in the Soho district of New York. And most recently, we've opened 1 in Houston, and we're about to open 1 in Nashville. Across all our locations, we have nearly 2,500 animals available for adoption. So, sorry, my clicker's having problems here. There we go. All right. We also are working on some other new locations that they're going to be announced soon. I do hope that you will take the opportunity to visit one of our locations sometime. You can take a tour, you can volunteer, or you can visit our welcome center in that beautiful Red Rock Canyon in southern Utah. So currently, we know that 2,000 cats and dogs are killed in shelters nationwide every single day. We also know that it doesn't have to actually be this way. In 1984, when Best Friends was founded, 17 million pets were killed in shelters annually. There was very little data, however, about what the save rate looked like. In fact, it wasn't until 4 years ago when Best Friends led a nationwide effort to retrieve and share data from private and public shelters that we were able to actually start including what save rates look like. As we approach the end of 2019, we are at a 77% save rate, with animals killed down to just 733,000. Just as a side note, I've been doing this slide at a couple different summits this year. It was really exciting for me to actually be able to update this number. When I started this, when I did this slide the first time, we were at 800,000. So we're making progress. It's really exciting. So we're at the edge of being able to bring the nation to a 90% save rate by 2025. Another way of looking at that metric is to say that 100% of healthy shelter pets are adopted. And as we get more data, we continually modify our KPIs. We don't really want to just stop at a 90% save rate. After all, our goal is to save them all. Now, our 2025 goal has a plan behind it, working in 3 primary areas: saving lives, uniting the movement, and mobilizing the public. I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail as I talk about our work and the technology we're using, before I go over how Veeam fits in allowing us to save animals and data using AWS services. So when we looked at the traditional adoption experience, we realized there was a huge room for improvement. We were one of the first adoption locations to put in a safe and inviting room where you can actually go in and actually meet your animal, sit down and see if it was a good fit for your family. We changed the adoption paperwork. You may remember it was 7 pages, like front and back, and we were looking for like that perfect fit. Well, we're down to just a single page. Best Friends also helps all families and find ways to make an adoption work, including food vouchers for low-income families, low-cost veterinary services, and helping cover transportation costs to help you take home an animal to its forever home. From a technology perspective, we continue to look back at that adoption data, first in our data warehouse, and most recently in a new data lake that we've been building on top of Amazon S3 and Athena. From this data, we continue to learn more about which communities need our help the most, and we're able to actually focus our efforts. Now, we want to be constantly innovating on how we can improve our efforts across the country. We're always asking ourselves, what technology can we use to help adoptions and saving lives? To do this, we've actually launched an innovation fund to help advance the use of technology and innovation at Best Friends. This was the result of reaching out and working with representatives from other welfare organizations, shelter software groups, and technology companies like Amazon and Veeam. We've really been focusing on that discussion to help us figure out how to innovate to save more lives. We're also working with startups and companies on mobile apps to support work in the animal welfare sector. We've recently launched a veterinary telemedicine application, and we're using chatbots we also use chatbots in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, which I'll talk a little bit more in a little bit. For example, one of the applications was specifically centered around cats. We realized that several locations around the country had an overabundance of kittens arriving in the shelters each spring. The majority of these kittens in those locations were actually from feral cat colonies. Working with local communities to do trap, neuter, return, or TNR programs, we've implemented mobile teams who would go and humanely trap, spay, or neuter the cats, and then return them to the colonies where they were found. This has overall decreased the number of feral-born kittens from ever even entering the shelters. This has been a data-driven project from the start. We gathered the results from our on-the-ground teams, as well as partners to track how cat colonies are doing. Using that data, we know where we need to send those mobile TNR teams. Originally, this was built on EC2 with a .NET Windows stack, but we've actively been looking at migrating that to be completely serverless, using S3, an API gateway, DynamoDB, and Lambda to gather that data. And then ultimately using Athena to help generate the results and reports. So we're also actively working to unite the movement. The success of our no-kill initiatives in Los Angeles and Utah, along with the years of collaboration of work in New York City, has proven that the coalition model works. Communities of all sizes and types throughout the country are now replicating these life-saving efforts. We are also growing our network of more than 2,800 animal welfare partners across all 50 states. And we're assisting those partners with providing them with the resources and expertise to actually save more lives. We reach out and we provide information about how to transform their adoption process, sharing knowledge about how to run effective adoption campaigns. And we even set up a super adoption events where shelters and rescue groups come together in one place to find as many homes for pets as possible in a single weekend. We're also providing assistance for evaluating how a partner can better utilize technology. By doing so, we are connecting our efforts locally and nationally to help speed the nation's progress towards no-kill. Additionally, we're working on creating a life-saving presence around the country. Again, with the data that we've gathered, we are able to focus on regions most needing support. And as we go into new regions, we're identifying how we can assist each location, as each one is quite a bit different. So how are we working to mobilize the public? Well, Best Friends has championed important legislation to support communities for people and pets. As an example, we recently opened our new pet adoption center in the heart of Manhattan. By doing so, we've established a communication hub that can actually reach millions of visitors every single year. Using that location, we expect to grow public awareness of our national efforts. And we hope to also inspire people using incredibly interactive displays and a variety of other technology. To raise awareness overall, we've been reaching out to those who have influence to help affect change. We can use data and cloud technologies for awareness programs. We're doing things like having a great web presence, Alexa skills, and again, chatbots. We've helped raise awareness around things like adopting before buying an animal, which has increased public awareness around puppy mills, and ultimately has led to a significant decrease in the number of commercial breeding facilities. Until we began that nationwide program to actually gather data, we only had our instincts on where to actually focus our efforts and execute our plan. Once we did have access to shelter statistics, we began to see patterns. And we began realizing that some states were ahead of the national average and some states were lagging. We're now in a position to make decisions based on data and metrics, allowing us to focus our efforts on those states that need our help the most. We recently launched a community dashboard on our website where you can see up-to-date information on your local shelters, the surrounding communities, and maps like this one showing where we are focusing our efforts. With our constant focus on saving lives with data, saving our data becomes just as important. And at our headquarters, we have some very interesting challenges. Now, as I mentioned, Best Friends headquarters is in a really rural portion of southern Utah, just outside the city of Kanab. And when I say remote, I'm really not joking around. Kanab has 2 stoplights, 3 fast food restaurants, 2 family-owned grocery stores, and a 1-screen movie theater showing movies once a day, Wednesday through Saturday. Well, we have 1 ISP. They have 1 fiber connection to the internet. When a fiber cut happens, and they do happen, the entire city goes dark. 911 services stop working, banks shut down, grocery stores can only take cash, and restaurants who are now using SaaS-provided registers scramble to even just find a calculator. As Best Friend continues to grow nationally, we have been slowly migrating a lot of our technology out of Kanab and into Amazon Web Services. Originally, when we had a fiber cut, the entire organization would just kind of shut down. But having AWS as our centralized technology hub has really helped alleviate a lot of that. However, our headquarters has the opposite problem. We need to be able to provide services to our Kanab headquarters that do not fit well with having them in the cloud when there's a fiber cut. Life-saving applications like our veterinary software, our digital x-ray machines, as well as other services like an IoT water pump, as well as a gas pump. We need to be able to safely back up our virtual machines in our on-prem data center. So 5 years ago, when I started at Best Friends, we were almost entirely virtualized. It was really exciting. We had 2 servers in an internal AWS accounts that were running some internal applications. And then we also hosted our website on AWS. We used Veeam at that time already to perform backups, but those backups happened to a NAS. And then one of us system engineers would actually go pull the hard drives out of the NAS, drive down the road to Kanab, and take them to a bank vault. It's just 8 miles away. So I started to try and make that better. Small improvements. We stood up a server in a colo facility in St. George that ends up being about 90 miles away. And then we used a Veeam backup copy job to replicate backups from the on-prem NAS to that location. Now this worked decently well, however, we still had some gotchas. St. George, while quite a distance for that fiber, is actually on the same fault plane and is impacted by the same torrential monsoons and flood patterns that affect Kanab. We weren't doing a 3-2-1 backup where you have 3 copies, 2 locations, and 1 offsite. We had 2-2-1. And we still had that 1 fiber line, and cuts were happening at least twice a year. Entire cities dark for 12 hours. After recent updates to Veeam, we actually began to rethink our backup and DR architecture. So our headquarters actually sits, like I said, we've expanded from that initial purchase of land. We're now at about 5,000 acres. So we have some isolation between buildings. And those 5,000 acres are actually on 2 entirely different floodplains. So our data center is actually on a fairly low point. I've actually gone in and seen about an inch of water standing after a really torrential rain. It's terrifying. So I wanted to make sure that I accounted for a flood actually taking out the data center, and along with it, our internet connectivity. So we added a NAS in a second building that we do Veeam backup copy jobs to. And then we utilized the new capacity tier of the scale-out repository feature in Veeam to actually copy the data from there to S3 to an entirely different region, and we finally have our 3-2-1 backup. Now we took some time to actually plan and test this solution out. Ultimately, we have a relatively low RTO and RPO for animal care applications, as it's actually affecting animal lives. And we didn't want to lose that capability. But after 2 months of planning and testing, and then a single day of actually making changes, we migrated away from the colo facility for our offsite backups to AWS S3. By doing so, we're spending nearly $3,500 less per month. We don't have additional hardware or OSs to manage. We're doing cross-region DR, and we are also now backing up critical animal care machines like our digital X-ray machine and blood testing machines that have never actually been virtualized, their desktops attached to that hardware using the new Veeam agent. Now we still have that single ISP with a single fiber connection. We haven't actually solved for that, but we have solved for many other DR scenarios by utilizing the capacity tier from Veeam and AWS S3 storage. Thanks to Veeam and our integration with AWS, we have a highly scalable and cost-effective backup and DR solution, which allows us to actually focus on our goal to save them all. So I'm going to go over a little bit about some of the natural disaster work that we do as well with partnerships with Veeam and AWS, where we can actually focus on saving animal lives. So in a natural disaster, just as in a technical disaster, we must use data effectively to support local communities. I'm going to go over a couple of the natural disaster and rescue situations that Best Friends has been involved with, what it was like for those of us in technology, and how Amazon services were utilized to actually make that be more effective. So this is an actual photo taken by one of our staff. I'm going to get choked up, sorry. During Hurricane Katrina. I always see it. Don't pay attention to that photo. The damage from Katrina, the subsequent flooding and breaking of levees in the greater New Orleans area caused one of the worst disasters in recorded US history. Best Friends was the first national welfare organization, animal welfare organization on the ground, helping thanks to our connection with animal control in the Jefferson Parish. Just one day after the storm blew through, we put in a small team to care for animals and do field work, which included land and water rescue of animals from neighborhoods in that impacted zone. If you think back to 2005, we did not have tools like Facebook. We were all on MySpace. Social media was not really a full-blown thing yet, so we were not able to post pictures of animals found or animals lost. It was not as easy to put out a call for help or provide updates and information. We did not yet have a cloud SaaS suite, so we didn't really have publicly available collaborative environments to work, share, and post data in. At that time, we didn't even have software in place to track animals to the degree that we can today. We're doing our best to help displaced animals and strays in need and reconnecting pets with owners, but it was a real struggle. What was IT doing? Well, we helped put in technology to run a temporary rescue, including internet services, laptops, and workstations. But we were also building an access database back at the sanctuary just so we could import and export Excel spreadsheets of animals found. What we do now would have really made a difference. So jumping forward, I was actually on the ground after Hurricane Harvey. When Hurricane Harvey hit Texas in August of 2017, Best Friends was on the ground and ready to go immediately after the storm. We sent in, again, a swiftwater rescue team, which brought in nearly 300 animals. I went down to help set up the infrastructure from an IT perspective for 3 different temporary animal shelters. That included internet access, printers, kiosks for the people to search for their animals, laptops for the vets, a phone system, everything that you can think of that you need to run a business. Our shelter animal software built on AWS allowed us to very quickly spin up a new location to track the animals as they entered the Pet Reunion Center at the NRG Arena. As we processed and rescued animals, we made sure to include as specific of a location as possible where the animal was found. With that data, we were able to actually print out flyers, put them up in the neighborhoods, and utilize localized Facebook groups for specific locations. And we ultimately led to 3,000 reunions of pets. We also used the data at our disposal to help identify which shelters around the country could help take some of those pets, of the remaining ones. Most of those were strays out of the region, freeing up the local shelters in the greater Houston area to continue their life-saving efforts. Thanks to the help of more than 120 animal welfare groups and more than 2,800 volunteers from across the country, nearly 3,000 animals were transferred to Best Friends network partners in 30 different states. A lot of numbers in that sentence. I always have to read it. Using our data warehouse on EC2, we were able to identify who and where we could send animals to in a fairly timely fashion. We would pull data once a day and generate reports using our new data lake. We were able to generate reports that looked a lot like this, and drastically decreasing the turnaround time to move animals around. It was just hours, and we've continued to make improvements. We would run this once a day. We can now do that in hours. As other hurricanes have come and gone, we've gotten smarter with the data at our disposal. We began working with the local partners in that hurricane path early to help move animals out of that region, emptying them to prepare for the hurricane. We're able to focus on efforts on clearing out an entire region of the country so that as animals come into the closest shelters, their data can be tracked and the animals move to other shelters, not directly in the hurricane path. In regards to Houston, Best Friends now has that permanent location there to continue to help save lives. Along with local animal welfare groups, we've set up that presence, and we're working to create a life-saving program there. So it's not just hurricanes, right? We also have fires that we support. So last year, California experienced the worst wildfires in history. And it continued this year as well, both in the northern and southern parts of the state. While many families were able to flee the fires with their pets, many were not able to, and there were a large number of dogs and cats in needs at the shelter. Best Friends has a partnership between the city of Los Angeles and our Mission Hill Center, and we reach out letting them know that we are ready to help. In 5 days, we were able to reach out to volunteers and firefighters, and they brought in over 100 dogs and cats into our Mission Hills facility. Now, the assistance Best Friends provided was largely to our volunteer engagement there. With new tools around how we manage our volunteer data, we were able to identify specific, very local volunteers and send out an SOS to them to help with that influx. This important collaboration between many organizations is a great example of how working together is so important. We believe that data and technology will continue to play an important role in how we respond to natural disasters. And with partnerships with AWS and Veeam, we are able to continue to improve our support and response during these stressful situations. I'm going to hand it back to Dustin so he can talk some more about their actual solutions.
All right. Thank you, Brent. It's good to kind of hear that story and then see how somebody's actually using it in the real world, because a lot of times we'll get up there, come to these presentations, and it's just me or some engineer from a company telling you how great our product is, and I like to see these kind of things because it kind of says the story itself. It's not something that some marketing slide that somebody came up with or something like that. So I'm going to skip through some of these marketing slides for you guys. But what it is ESG did a study on data protection and cloud native workloads. So you can see there that it's pretty easy to look at. 66% of the customers said that they had a mandate to reduce hardware storage costs, and that they believe that the cloud is the most effective place to put it. And that's kind of why we took a look at the cloud tier when we came out with it. So cloud tier for us is a feature or a component of a scale-out backup repository. Scale-out backup repository in Veeam is a logical grouping of repositories, making it easier to manage. So if you have an on-prem location or you're managing workloads in the cloud, you'd have repositories where you're landing backups. The cloud tier portion of it is a tiering mechanism, and in our current version, it's a tiering mechanism. So after X period of days, and the backup chain is closed, it will tier that backup from primary storage to S3. In our next version, V10, which is out soonish, I'll say, we'll have a feature called instant copy. So what that's going to do is going to take it kind of to the next level. So as soon as a backup is complete, it'll instantly copy that backup to S3. Which is really what a lot of customers have been asking us for. The tiering mechanism is great, but we want to have it instantly copied up there. So that'll be in the next version. Let's take a look at what makes it a little bit different. So when we're talking about a backup file on-prem, you have a VBK file. That's our full backup file. And inside of that is data and metadata. So when we're moving that or tiering that to S3, what we're doing is we're moving the metadata, putting it in one folder, and then we're moving the data and putting it in another folder, and then we compress that VBK down to a much smaller file on-prem. And the reason why we're doing that is because it enables us to use it as a local cache. We can pull that VBK file locally and see exactly where data is landed in S3 and just pull back just what we need. So we're not talking to S3 a lot. We're not, pulling back unnecessary data. And as most of you probably know, that just saves cost, saves time. You're not having to pull back a large full backup just to restore a file out of it. You can actually do a individual file. So all of the functionalities work. We have instant VM restore, the entire computer, file level backup, all of that, as well as intelligent block recovery. So what that means is let's say you have 2 full backups. When you tier one of those off to S3, the reality is that some of that data still exists in that other full backup. So what we'll do is when we're restoring either out of S3 on-prem or S3 wherever we're restoring to, we'll look to see if that local primary repo has some of the blocks that we need, and we'll leverage it first, and then pull down the only blocks that we need out of S3. Again, saving time, saving data retrieval cost, and things like that. Again, there's no charging for it. We don't charge you for it. It's a feature. If you have the product, you have that feature. We're not going to charge you on storage consumption in S3. You're already paying for that storage, so we're not going to charge you on that. And the big thing is no vendor lock-in. So to Veeam, it's your data. We're just a mechanism for backing that data up. So if you were to ever, say for some reason, want to get off of Veeam, you can use the community edition or free edition to restore any of those backups. So again, you don't have to have a support contract, live, all this kind of stuff like you traditionally do with some other vendors. We don't care. It's your data. You own it. We're just a mechanism for you. And then we have what we call cloud mobility. Cloud mobility is a marketing term for the ability to move data from either on-prem into AWS, as well as taking some of the AWS backups that you have, maybe moving it back on-prem for testing, test dev, leverage some of the resources that you may have on premises that you don't want to spend time in AWS. Whatever reason, we're just trying to make it easy for you to move your data wherever you want to move it. Again, ESG study, I'll kind of skip over that, but 23% of backups expected to be in the cloud by next year. So we're right around the corner of that. And that study was done last year, so I would expect that it would probably be even higher. Cloud mobility. So cloud mobility is a way to restore any Veeam backup that is in any Veeam repository into an EC2 instance. So if that could be a physical machine you've backed up, that could be a VMware machine you backed up, a Hyper-V machine, you leveraged one of our agents. We don't care. If it's a Veeam backup in a Veeam repository, you can restore that into an EC2 instance. And let's take a look at what it looks like. Again, these are some of the highlights. So we're not locking you into that. But what it looks like is it's a wizard-driven restore program that you run from within Veeam, and you add your cloud credentials, you add your AWS credentials, and then you go through a restore process. So you pick a backup, you pick whatever kind of instance type you want, you go through the wizard, it connects to your VPC settings, it connects to the network, and then it goes through this restoration process. So what it does is, let's say you have a backup on premises, it's going to copy that backup into S3, and then we're going to mount that backup in S3. We deploy a little Linux appliance automatically. We strip the VMDKs out of that backup or whatever file we're trying to do, the disk out of that backup. We create EBS volumes out of it, and then we create an instance, mount it to it, and your instance is up and running. Sounds like a lot, but the longest part of the process is just the movement of data. Once we do the conversion and add the instance, it's up and running, and there you go. So you can use it for migration purposes. You can use it for, I'm hesitant to always say DR, but like a lightweight DR. You can script it out. DR in my mind is a little bit something more automated, orchestrated type approach, but I have people use it for that. And those are some of the technical benefits. One I want to hit on is the BIOS conversion. A lot of the new platforms are using UEFI. That's not supported in EC2 or for an EC2 instance. So we do a BIOS conversion. If the machine is a UEFI BIOS type, so we'll switch that over so that it will run inside of EC2. And that's you got to forgive me. We were working on our slides up until this last minute, and this slide is not one of mine. But anyway, so while we're on that, one last thing I want to mention. We have another session tomorrow that's going to go over. I believe it's at the same time as this one, but it's in the Venetian. You can look in your book and find the room, or the app and find the room number. But it's going over a product we just announced today. So we have a new product we just released. It's for, it's in the marketplace. It's for EC2 instances. So it's backup of cloud native Amazon EC2 instances. It's a free edition in the marketplace. It's up to 10 instances. So you can manage up to 10 instances. But the cool thing about it is that we're not just managing EBS snaps of those volumes. We're also doing backups of those EBS snaps. So you can enable both of them. You can use it just to manage the EBS snapshot portion of it, or you can enable the backup portion of it, which means we'll copy that into another S3 bucket, and then we kind of convert it into a Veeam format, and then you can migrate that backup wherever. So you can copy it back on premises. You can move it to another region. You can restore it to another region. All those types of features. Again, they'll go into a deep dive on it tomorrow, but we're really excited about it. It's worth checking out. We're giving demos at our booth as well, so if you'd like to see a demo of it, please stop by the booth, check it out. And if you have any questions, Brent and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have. So We'll take a few minutes here and answer any questions. If not, you can come up to us and talk to us after this. So thank you for coming, and thank you for listening to the story. Thank you.